Type eating in moderation into YouTube search and you get two opposing camps. There's the weight loss coaches who say moderation is stupid, a scam, or doesn't work. And then there's the weight loss coaches who argue moderation is important, it's healthy, it's the key to living longer. What if I told you both camps were right, or at least some of the things they're saying, but also that both camps are missing something? The moderation supporters don't pay enough attention to how hard it is to achieve moderation, particularly for some groups of people. The moderation haters seem to be misinterpreting the concept of moderation. And neither group is acknowledging that practically, moderation needs to look different for different people. So as a weight loss psychologist, I want to clear the argument up. I believe moderation is beneficial for long-term weight management. I believe moderation is challenging, but I also believe that everyone can learn how to eat in moderation. And crucially, I believe that moderation will look different for different people. In the next 19 minutes, I'm going to summarize the key points on each side of the argument. I'll explain what eating in moderation actually means, and I'll provide you with some psychological principles to make eating in moderation work for you. I'm Dr. Paula Watson. I'm a Liverpool-based psychologist providing therapy for people struggling with weight, disordered eating and exercise. This is the 9th video in my weight loss psychology series where I'm sharing truth 8 of 10 hard truths that will help you understand why you struggle with weight loss and help you feel less alone. Please check out my other videos in the series, particularly the intro, which I've linked to below, and please subscribe if you'd like to see more content linked to weight loss psychology. The truth I'm talking about today is that moderation is the key, but most people don't know how to unlock it. I found it really interesting doing the research for this video, and I was surprised to find such a backlash against moderation from coaches. Moderation is something I usually preach about, but I can totally see where the moderation haters are coming from. My thinking's evolving all the time on this, both professionally in my work with clients, but also reflecting on my own relationship with food. And I can totally see both sides of the argument. In line with the moderation supporters, the whole approach I support clients with is about moving away from having good or bad foods, moving away from restricting and binging, and learning how to do moderation in a way that works for them. And this is all aimed at learning to eat in a way that allows them to manage their weight and feel happy and healthy in the long term, because we know moderation promotes lifelong health and well-being. Flexibility and nothing out of bounds is something I've always advocated, rather than removing the biscuits from the house entirely. Now, this is for two reasons. Firstly, relying only on not having those biscuits in the house is like putting a plaster on without healing the wound underneath. So we can't ever remove biscuits from our lives outside of the house. And if our lack of control around biscuits is still there, we'll be vulnerable every time we go to the supermarket, every time we walk past a shop, every time we're in a work buffet. So moderation encourages us to learn skills to self-regulate that will help us manage our weight in an environment that's full of temptations. Secondly, if we constantly try and avoid these foods, it can make us want them more. So something that clients often tell me is they try not to buy anything unhealthy in their weekly shop. But then often they'll then go on separate trips to buy binge foods that they're missing. So moderation is great because it doesn't deprive us of the foods we enjoy. So instead of avoidance, I use cognitive behavior therapy or CBT to help clients reach the point where they can have biscuits in the house without feeling they have to eat them all. And I've seen this work with client after client. Clients who thought it would never be possible and were in the habit of eating whole packets of chocolate biscuits are amazed that they can now have a packet of biscuits sitting in the cupboard for weeks and not touch them. So with the right support, moderation is possible, even when you've had an all or nothing relationship with food in the past. But in support of the moderation haters, I also know, having worked with hundreds of people to change their health behaviours, that one of the most effective tools is to actually take those foods out of the house, so we're reducing our exposure to them. So if we don't bring chocolate into the house, we don't see chocolate every time we open the cupboard, and we're less likely to eat it constantly. So let's not make things any harder for ourselves than they need to be. And certainly, I know that not buying those ultra processed foods helps me. And when I used to run the family obesity program, changing the environment at home and having fruit out so it's accessible and removing things like chocolate was one of the most powerful change techniques. So a challenge of moderation is that if the foods are in the house, we're more likely to eat them. I also get that food addiction is real, and for some people, it just doesn't work to eat smaller amounts of foods like chocolate, biscuits, and crisps because these can be really triggering. So, in these situations, abstaining from certain foods can be helpful. And another challenge of moderation then is that it's sometimes easier to have none than it is to have one. And I want to thank Carry On Living Well for her excellent video on moderation and food addiction. Carrie's documenting her really impressive weight loss journey and speaks very candidly about how hard moderation can be if you struggle to control yourself around food. And whilst I can share stories from hundreds of my clients, I understand this isn't the same as hearing from someone who's going through it themselves. So do check out Carrie's channel if you want evidence that sustainable, slow weight loss really is possible, whatever your starting point was. Now, coming to my own relationship with food, I also can relate to it feeling easier to cut something out entirely rather than having some of it. I've been on a bit of a journey with this. In 2021, I became vegan, mainly for environmental reasons, but I also agree with many of the arguments around treatment of animals. Plus, I was keen to try it from a health perspective. So I love vegetables. I've never really enjoyed meat, so it wasn't a huge change other than stopping the dairy and fish. But I remember at the start, my intention was to not be too black and white about it. I wanted to try and be flexibly vegan. But within the first few weeks, I found it was much easier to have strict rules, mainly because of the social element, but also with controlling myself around tasty foods that aren't good for me. I found it much easier to say, no, I can't eat that because of my moral principles, than I did because I was already full or I didn't need it. And admittedly, I love my food, and this is always something I've struggled with. So I also found that I got less pushing from others, and they were more likely to just accept no the first time if it was, I can't have it because I'm vegan, rather than keep going with, I'll just have one, just one won't hurt, if I was saying no through choice. So having clear boundaries can sometimes be easier than moderation when it comes to social settings. And essentially, it was easier to have a strict rule than to constantly be going through that decision process, which is another challenge with moderation, as it can lead to decision fatigue if we're making choices all the time. So it's sometimes easier to have strict rules than to be overwhelmed with choice. Then a few months ago, I was listening to a podcast about disordered eating, and it dawned on me that there was some disordered thinking in the way I was personally approaching my veganism. Perhaps I was hiding behind the black and white rules rather than practicing the moderation and flexibility that what my work is all about. So whilst I still believe the moral arguments around the environment, treatment of animals, and I don't have any issue with anyone who wants to be fully vegan from a moral standpoint, but for me, I realised it really doesn't make a difference to the environment if I occasionally have some fish, or if I occasionally eat an egg, or if I sometimes eat biscuits which have some hidden milk in. I was also conscious that my veganism sometimes had social implications for those around me, as sometimes it's just so challenging to find anything fully plant-based. So I'd be dragging my poor partner around from pillar to post just to find somewhere to eat. And I realised it was about me rather than them. But at the same time, I was consuming unavoidable lactose in things like medication and probably other animal products I didn't realise I was having. So my point is, I wasn't being 100% plant-based anyway, and it was practically impossible to be 100% plant-based. So I might as well eat a more nutritious, less limited, and more sociable diet and be 98% plant-based. What was bothering me most was the hypocrisy. By cutting out whole food groups and restricting myself from foods that would be nutritionally helpful for me and that I did enjoy, I was doing the exact thing that I was trying to help my clients move away from. So that day, I quit veganism and I became more flexible. I still eat mostly plant-based. I reintroduced some eggs, some fish, and I'm loving being able to have the occasional sticky toffee pudding, cream egg, or even my partner's delicious corned beef hash, because moderation encourages nutritional balance. So looking at these points together, it's clear to see moderation has lots of benefits, but it can also be really challenging for many people, particularly if you've always had an all or nothing mentality. But What I'd like to draw your attention to is look at this list of challenges, because I think the concept of eating in moderation is often misinterpreted. The challenges are real, and recognising these will improve your chances of success. But I don't believe any of these points mean moderation isn't possible. If I were helping you to learn to eat in moderation, it'd be okay to limit the food you bring into the house. It'd be okay to still have some rules if it eases the overwhelm of having too much choice. And it'd be okay to avoid certain foods if they're triggering for you. In a balanced, moderate diet, someone might know that cake's unhelpful for them. This is fine to cut it out, and it's not likely going to interfere with your day-to-day life. Do, however, need to be a bit careful if you're restricting larger groups of foods to make sure that A, you're still getting the nutrients you need, and B, that your quest for perfection doesn't lead to a different type of disordered eating. There'll always be some times in life where we can't control what goes into the food we eat, such as when we're traveling, for example. So learning to cope with these times will help you have a more sustainable and a healthy relationship with food. I've seen in so many clients that moving to moderation is helpful for enjoying social occasions. The pressure's lifted, and sometimes for the first time in their life, they can enjoy their time with their family and friends rather than dreading how they're going to manage their food. So if I'm saying all these arguments against moderation are actually a part of moderation, what does eating in moderation look like? Yes, moderation is about flexibility, it's about enjoyment, it's about eating a wide range of nutritious foods, including anything you want. But moderation doesn't mean eating everything you want all the time. It's about eating food in healthy amounts overall for your body's needs, not too much, not too little. Moderation also doesn't mean never letting yourself overeat, and it doesn't mean restricting your portions at every meal. Crucially, moderation isn't about extremes, it's about balance. But the problem is, when you've never done this before, balance can feel very abstract. So don't worry if this feels overwhelming right now. You've got no experience yet of moderation. Look what moderation looks like for you. You've got loads of experience of strict diets and loads of experience of all rules out the window, but you don't yet have a blueprint for moderation. So it's going to take some trial and error, but that's okay. Now, I'm not a nutritionist, and there's plenty of information out there already about how to eat in moderation. So I'm not going to go into what moderation looks like in terms of actually a daily or weekly diet. Instead, I'm going to share 3 psychological principles to help you find an approach to moderation that works for you. Because my first principle is exactly that. Moderation is different for everyone. And this is perhaps why the weight loss coaches can't agree. If you're someone with perfectionist tendencies, for instance, you've got a past of being highly restrictive around food, constant guilt and shame around food, or perhaps you've been obsessed with clean eating, it's going to be important that moderation for you doesn't involve any strict rules and it doesn't ban any foods. Your pathway to food freedom is going to be about learning to do some instead of all or nothing. It's going to be about giving yourself permission to eat a wider range of foods and about refinding enjoyment in food. Importantly, it will be about learning that you can do all this without it having a negative impact on your weight. Whereas if you're someone who struggles with self-regulation, decision-making, or controlling yourself around food, moderation for you might include some simple rules. For example, cereal is one of my favourite foods, and I seem to be totally incapable of pouring myself a bowl of cereal of a normal human size. So it's the one thing I do weigh out every morning. Or perhaps if you know you struggle to control yourself around certain foods, you might stop bringing these into the house. This is okay. The second psychological principle is to focus on restraint, not restriction. Let's consider restriction first. Restriction involves rigid rules. It often involves starving ourselves of what our body needs, and it feels pressured. We're not allowed to do this. We might have thoughts like, if I don't restrict, I'm never going to lose weight, or if I don't avoid bread and pasta, I'm going to gain weight. Examples of restriction might be like never eating before 12 o'clock, skipping meals to compensate after binging, cutting out refined sugars entirely, or sticking to a rigid calorie count to try and lose weight. Restraint, on the other hand, is more flexible and comes from within. It's motivated by a desire to nourish our body and to be healthy. And although it involves holding back, it feels empowering. It feels like a positive and conscious choice to move us towards our goals. Examples of restraint might be resisting the second chocolate bar, even though you're really tempted to have more. Choosing to have a nutritious snack and take one into work instead of having a biscuit. Or leaving that last piece of pizza because you're already stuffed. And this is where I see a lot of misinterpretation around moderation. Some people talk about moderation as though it means constantly restricting our food all the time. Others talk about it as though moderation means eating everything in sight. Neither is helpful or true, of course. But what is true is that to eat in moderation and manage our weight in the long term, we do need to learn some restraint. The binge eating therapist explains this much better than I can, and she's got an excellent video on restraint versus restriction, so I've linked to this below if you'd like to explore the topic more. The third psychological principle is that moderation is a skill that will take some time to learn. So it's okay if you don't get it right on the first try. Being all or nothing is a common thinking error for humans, particularly when it comes to food. So if we're having a good day, then we wreck it by eating something off plan. The sabotaging thoughts creep in and tell us we've blown it now, we might as well start again tomorrow. This, of course, makes little logical sense. Kind of like dropping your phone, and instead of picking it up to be relieved it's okay, you decide to smash it multiple times until it's well and truly wrecked. So it's going to take some time to unlearn these thinking errors and replace them with more flexible thinking that supports a moderation approach. Now, the reason people struggle with moderation isn't because moderation isn't possible, but because people haven't yet addressed the underlying relationship with food. And this is where working with a psychologist can help. So if you'd like to learn more about what this involves, check out my video on CBT for weight loss. But as a starting point, here's a few ideas that might be helpful for learning the skill of moderation yourself. Firstly, routine can be extremely helpful in taking away some of the brain effort required in moderation. Most people who are used to eating in moderation could probably tell you what they're going to eat tomorrow and what they ate yesterday. For me, my breakfast and lunch are pretty much the same every day. But within these, I have a wide variety of foods, so I'm getting a nutritionally balanced diet. Now, at first, this is going to take some planning. But over time, as your routine becomes habitual, it take up less and less brain space. Secondly, try and focus on some rather than all or none. It's not an exact science, but a good ballpark might be to think about 80-20 or 90-10 of your diet being more nutritious to less nutritious food options. And whilst just one really is okay, remember there's a difference between having just one chocolate bar every few days or weeks and having just one chocolate bar after each meal, because this then becomes just 21 chocolate bars. Thirdly, try and view your lifestyle as a calm sea where you've got your normal routine of mostly healthy eating with occasional wild times where you might have indulgent episodes every now and again. It's normal for a balanced lifestyle to involve some overeating and some times where the shift is more 20-80 in terms of nutritious, non-nutritious foods. This is okay. Food also has a really important social role in our culture, and eating in moderation is about being able to enjoy these occasions guilt-free. This might be a meal out for your best friend's birthday, it might be an unplanned evening once in a while where you just feel like indulging, or it might be a family holiday where you eat a few too many ice creams. But the important thing is to enjoy these occasions as part of a normal part of your lifestyle. There's no need for guilt or shame, and there's no need to restrict to compensate afterwards. Your body can cope, and your body will return to its calm when the wild times are over. Thank you for watching this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts on eating in moderation, so please comment below. What works best for you? And has what I've shared today changed your perspective in any way? If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to make sure you catch the rest of my weight loss psychology series. And I'll be back next week to unpick my favourite topic, and one that's challenging for most people, and that is motivation.